What's going on, Imperials? It's Emperor Cubone here. Generation 8 is finally upon us in the beautiful Galar region. With that comes many considerations, and wondering about what might be in store for the games. Does this mean that Pokémon Following You isn't returning? Now, I by no means want to turn into a channel that talks about nothing but Sword and Shield until the games come out, but I did think it would be a good idea to settle on a list of do's and don'ts for these games. But I will strive to do more than just the new generation standard fare, like bring back gyms. I'd like to tailor this list specifically to the new games on the Switch. My first hope for these games is that they will have more Pokémon. Hey genius, isn't that a given with a new Pokémon game? No, I don't just mean to have monsters that we've never seen before. I'm talking actual numbers. For the last 2 generations of Pokémon, they have had less than 100 new creations to add to the roster on the whole. This isn't necessarily a problem for some, since they do supplement this by filling in the decks with old favorites, but I'm looking at the big picture. We spend maybe 3 or 4 years in a given region for a generation, and the best reminder we have of our time there in subsequent entries is the Pokémon themselves. If there are only 80 or so that they've made, it simply makes less of an impact on the players, and ultimately on the franchise as a whole. Now, I could just be accused of being greedy, since I'm sure it does take a lot to fully render these Pokémon in 3D, and one could argue that this allows for greater creative freedom to maybe make better entries, although I do still have some doubts about that one. But I'm not asking for much, just have 100. Before the 3DS, the lowest amount we ever got was 100 new Pocket Monsters. I feel that that's a reasonable goal to attain. And let's be honest, if they had too much more than that, then they'd be hurtling ever closer to that 1,000 mark they seem to be so afraid of. But adding 100 at this point would still let them lowball it in the next generation. It could even end up by landing on the 1,000 mark at the close of Generation 9. Despite this being such a simple request, I seriously have my doubts about them following this route. Even though increasing the total number of never-before-seen Pokémon would help to open up the world in a refreshing way, and also recapture the wonder of generations past. Now, with that being said, something they absolutely do not need to do is to make so many legendaries. Legendary Pokémon are supposed to be powerful singular forces of nature that are incredibly rare. At least that's how it used to go. In more recent generations, they've gone a little watch hog wild with what are supposed to be incredibly hard to find fables. What exactly makes them legendary if they seem so commonplace? But let's just review. In Alola, we had the box art Pokémon, which have large significance in the story and come from the same humble origins. That's perfectly fine. Then we also have the Pokémon that can forcibly fuse with them. That's still an okay number. Then each island has its own guardian that comes complete with a shrine. Okay. Oh, and there's a little man-made robot and a living shadow that stalks people. I'm not entirely sure that's necessary. And the sky opened up and a bunch of buff space aliens came pouring out. Guys, you were doing just fine before. You just need to know when to stop. And that's not even mentioning the weird Thundercats reject. As we pointed out before, Alola was not all that bountiful on new Pokémon. But that's tempered even more when a fourth of the dex is made up of Pokémon that you're never able to see or use in a standard playthrough. I am not averse to legendary Pokémon on the whole, but I do feel that their reputation has been hurt by oversaturation. And while I'm certain that the Galar region could come up with some fantastic legends, with even some potentially great locations already shown for them, I do hope that they're able to pace themselves. The next thing I would want Sword and Shield to do is to definitely reference the Kalos region. I say Kalos specifically because of the real-life parallels of the two, with Kalos and Galar drawing inspiration from France and the UK respectively. Or just England, or maybe Great Britain. Different people have different stances on that, but we'll figure it out. Regardless, these two areas are the closest that we've had any two regions that weren't based in Japan. Having a neighbor from the real world could help to highlight the unique culture this land can provide. France has a long and storied history with the British Empire, and could reflect into the games. Or maybe the Galar region could even be the ones with which Kalos had the Great War 3,000 years ago. It wouldn't seem out of place to me for a region that's games are named after tools of combat. Now, I know that the real-life locations don't necessarily have to be reflected in this made-up fantasy world, but it would certainly be a nice treat to the folks that live there. And obviously, there will be references to pretty much every region in the games. That's just par for the course. But I would really want them to dig into the Kalos angle. There could be a whole town of people that have migrated up and moved to Galar, but still can travel back across the channel and visit their homeland if they want. I'm not suggesting that they offer us to go back to Kalos in the post-game or anything, but just to let us know that it's not that far off. There are a number of trains throughout the Galar region, so some have even suggested that we could maybe connect them back to the infamous Koraway Town station that goes nowhere. But I kinda doubt that. In fact, I would prefer that they don't do that, because something I don't want them to do is to pick up slack from previous generations. What I mean by that comes specifically from the last generation. Sun and Moon did have rampant changes to the Pokémon games, both big and small, from throwing in island trials to showing battle information handily on the bottom screen. However, everything in the games wasn't so new. One piece of the puzzle about halfway through the game is the Zygarde Cube. This artifact is what allows you to collect all of the little Zygarde cells and cores to create Zygarde in its various forms, depending on how much you gather, all the way up to its massively powerful complete form. And isn't that kind of interaction great for a brand new Pokemon like that? What's that? Oh yeah, Zygarde wasn't new. They had it in X and Y. Back then it just had one form, but then they decided to shoehorn in a bunch of extra gimmicks and special moves and things into the next games. Another inexplicable appearance was from a Kalos starter with Greninja. But not just any old Greninja, no. This one was an Ash Greninja. You know, that weird wish fulfillment trope from the anime. You randomly get mailed this totally not a Mega Pokemon, and that's about all the story significance it has. There is no reason for it to be here, other than that they wanted to try it out last generation, but didn't get their act together in time. I realize that these are largely due to the fact that we never got another game in the Kalos region after the first two. That usually provides a chance to add in small details, or at least wrap things up. The place to do this is not in the next region, making no sense in the process. If you were really that worried about dropping the ball, you should have committed to that Z version. Or just wait for the remakes. I just don't want the Galar region to be filled with baffling pickups from previous generations, so that it can hopefully be recognized on its own merits. Now, on this next point, you can call me nostalgic, but I think what they need to do is give us a jerk rival. And I know what you're saying. How is that specific to Sword and Shield? We'll get to that in a bit. But for a while now, we've had what others have called the sickly sweet version of what are supposed to be our competition. That has turned some people off of the concept of rivals as a whole, but that's not entirely fair, because we haven't always been burdened in such a manner. Sometimes the rivals aren't nice to a fault, and can actually be competent battlers, which is a nice change of pace. But really, that's not what we want either. In the first Pokemon games, we were confronted with a jerk kid that lived next door, who put us down at every turn, and somehow always seemed one step ahead. And they kept that going in the next games by making the rival an actual criminal. And later, as we even found out, the son of a crime boss. And after so many put-downs, it felt great to pop some sense into this fool. And we went from this to beating up a kid with severe medical infirmities. So you can see how this change might have bothered some people. So we obviously don't want to have another rival that makes things easier, because honestly, that's the opposite of what they're supposed to do. But what makes this specific to the Galar region? Well, what I'm envisioning is a stuck-up, snobbish rich kid from an expensive boarding school as your rival. Now, that's not to say that anyone from a prep school like that is obnoxious and snooty. but wouldn't it feel great to pound a jerk into the pavement that doesn't know the value of $1? Having the best Pokemon money can buy will only get him so far, but your hard work and determination can show him that money isn't everything. I think that would be a lot more satisfying than another person that just wants to be your best friend. So hopefully, we can get a taste of that rich jerk rival and actually get to enjoy putting them in their place once again. And speaking of money, really the biggest thing that I hope they don't do with these games on the Switch is to have paid internet. I know this is a huge long shot because it's basically free money for them, but hear me out. In Generation 4, we got access to Wi-Fi, and that literally changed the Pokemon game forever, since we could now battle and trade with anyone across the globe. All you had to do was have internet access. That continued and evolved, even letting us deposit Pokemon, offering what we wanted in return. Then eventually, we got Pokemon Bank, which is a method of transferring Pokemon up to the current games and external storage. However, this was a paid service. We could only access it for a fee, but as nominal as that was, it didn't interfere with the standard tenets of gameplay for anyone that was unable to pay. Battling and trading were still possible on any internet service you could access, even if it's just free Wi-Fi from a restaurant. Now, Nintendo recently put out their online service for the Switch, which, among other things, lets you battle other players in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. This service is a paid entry only, meaning that unless you want to ruin your friendships over and over again by playing in person, you have to fork over the cash. Now, some might say that it's irrational to expect getting things for free when they can make money off of it, to which I say, I really don't expect it, rather I'm pleading for it. To me, it taints the purity of a franchise to handicap its players due to a paywall, no matter how minimal it might be. This is probably already a done deal, and they'll include this method of revenue for the new games no matter what, but a Pokemon Master can dream, can't he? And just really quick, one last selfish thing that I'd like for them to do is to continue regional variants, specifically making new ones. I really appreciated this aspect of the Pokemon games that was introduced in Sun and Moon. Not only is having such a thing realistic, but also allows for older Pokemon to have a new spotlight. But hopefully this time there would be more than just Kanto Pokemon. It's not much, but I really hope regional variants come back. Even more so than triple battles or mega evolutions or Z moves, and won't just be something that we'll look back on and say, oh, regional variants, how Gen 7. So, those are what I believe to be the biggest do's and don'ts for Pokemon Sword and Pokemon Shield. If all of these suggestions come to pass, Pokemon will certainly debut on the Switch with a bang. If only it could get here sooner. Which aspects are you most hoping for in the Galar region? Let me know down in the comments. Also be sure to leave a like, share this video, and subscribe so that you too can become an Imperial today. And we'll see you around next time!